Welcome to Holistic Health for Happy Kids, the podcast where we dive into the root causes of children's health challenges and explore natural solutions to help little ones thrive. I'm Lisa, a passionate paediatric naturopath and mum of 3, dedicated to empowering parents with practical tips and expert insights to raise healthy, happy kids. Each episode will unpack common childhood health concerns like allergies, eczema, fussy eating, and gut health, and share evidence-based advice to support your child's wellness naturally. Let's create a generation of thriving children, one holistic step at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey. So welcome to this episode of Holistic Health for Happy Kids. And today I'm joined by Erin, who is a chiropractor at Brain Body Health in Gladesville. So hello, Erin, how are you?
Hey Lisa, I'm really awesome. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. So today we're going to be talking a lot about chiropractic care for kids. And to be honest, it's not an area that I know a lot about, even though I feel like the majority of my clients actually come to see you or somebody in your practice. But why don't we start off? Just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into doing chiropractic care for kids.
Yeah, okay. So I've always been a little girl that has always asked the question of why. I was like, Mummy, why are you doing this? Or Dad, why are you doing that? I was always very curious and I always was seek to understand. And as I got a little bit older and just before I started studying, I was working as a support worker and I worked with a lot of kids with ASD, ADHD, as well as learning difficulties. So what that usually would look like is we would go out to flip out or we would go to Luna Park or we'd go to the beach and we'd just have fun. We would just have fun. But as we know, a lot of kids have a lot of challenges. They have a lot of sensory difficulties or sensory challenges. And me being me, I was like, why is that the case?
Mm.
Why does kids going to the beach find sand uncomfortable? Or why can they only eat a certain fraction of foods? I just found that so interesting. And I was like, why? I always ask myself the question why. Studied chiropractic, learned about the brain and the nervous system, and I was like, whoa.
Mm.
I was like, how can I, because I loved working with the kids. It was just so much fun, but you would drop them off at home at the end of your shift and you could see on the parent's face how delighted they were to know that their child had an awesome day, but knowing what the transition would be like at home. And sometimes it was often really, really, really hard. And you'd be with these families for a long time and you'd get to know them, the ins and outs of what happens in their home when you're not there. And I was just often asking myself, why does this happen? Like, what's going on in that child's brain and nervous system that they might need a little bit more support? So once I finished study and I was like, how can I merge these two worlds together? So I love how like all of it aligned up. So I got asked to come and help at this pediatric seminar. I was in my final year and I was asked, can you come and just like hand out lanyards and help people sign in? I was like, yeah, okay, sweet, no worries. I would love to learn more about kids. So I did my job in the morning and then I was able to sit down with the seminar. And there was a chiropractor up on stage and her name is Dr. Genevieve. And she was talking about the Malilo method. And she was talking about the kids that she's worked with and the incredible challenges that they've had and how they've transitioned into having more of a calmer and balanced brain and nervous system. And I was like, I want to do what she does. I don't know what it is, but I want to do what she does. So, and then I did some more research and I was trying to understand, okay, what is this Malilo method? Tell me about it. And I was absolutely blown away. I then found our clinic in Gladesville, Brain and Body Health, and I contacted my now boss, Dr. Eric, and I said, "Hey, I need to come check out what you do." And as we did some work in Malilo method, and then as we started seeing more kids, I think the words to explain it is life changing. And once you can see it, you can't unsee it. So once I really learned about the brain and the nervous system and some of the signs and symptoms or the behaviors that you see for kids, and then you could correlate to what the nervous system was trying to tell you, I was like, oh my goodness, it's right here in front of us. How do we help these kids? How do we bring their brain and their nervous system down to balance and to baseline so they're not living that fight or flight 24/7? So that's kind of where my journey has been so far, and I have not looked back. I have absolutely not looked back. I absolutely love it.
That's awesome. And I think the beauty of like the clients that see us also see the clients that see you on their nervous system in multiple different ways. Like we're giving them herbs and nutrients and different things, and you're doing what you do. And that's how you get the best results, is when like you collaborate with other practitioners and you all work together for the same goal, which is actually quite rare.
Yeah.
And I know we were talking offline before about my previous career in the food industry. And whenever you work in a factory, everything has to work smoothly and work well, or you waste money. So one of the key kind of tenets in the supply chain was to ask the 5 whys. So you ask why 5 times until you ultimately get to the root cause. And that's my 20 years in the food industry or whatever it was. That's probably the one thing that I really took away, is to ask why 5 times, and then you actually get to what the problem is. So yeah, there's always a reason, like we said, like there's always.
Absolutely. I totally get it. And I've learned about that concept as well, because especially when you're meeting a family for the first time and you're trying to understand their dynamic or challenges or their strengths. And I have found asking that question in different ways to really hone in on that root cause. Like, why is it so important that you're here today? Why is it so important that we help your child? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for them? And what does it mean for your whole family? Because I think if you get it on a real deep emotional level, you understand the reason why, not just of why you're helping a behavior or a challenge or a sensory difference. It's like, no, it's because I want connection for my family. That's essentially where it always comes back to for lots. I want to feel like a family. I want to be able to have my child have the best opportunity that they can ever have.
Yeah.
And I think you're exactly right. By getting to that deep root cause, the big why, can help so many families understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. And the parents that see us are, like, generally speaking, the parents who will pull out all the stops to actually get to that answer, and not just throw everything into it to try and achieve that what they need for their kids. And so and I struggle to say the word, the Malilo method, but did you then do extra training in the Malilo method?
Yeah, so it's a huge, massive course, but we've done elements of it. So with the Malila method, the whole essence of it is looking within the brain and the nervous system and aiming to balance both hemispheres. So we predominantly look at something called primitive reflexes. Now, primitive reflexes are these automatic involuntary movements that all babies are born with. They help us navigate the world, move, learn, but also bond with our mum. Now, they're really important in the first 12 months of life, but beyond 12 months, based on the way that the brain develops, we don't need these reflexes anymore. Because as the brain develops, the big meaty parts of the cortex, where all the thinking and all the listening happens, just starts to develop more and become more stronger. So they inhibit these reflexes. So I often explain it to parents as we're on a bicycle. As we're learning to ride our bicycle, we've got training wheels on. These training wheels are going to be awesome to learn to navigate, to go over some bumps. But as we get a little bit older, we don't need those training wheels anymore. So most kids, and for lots of different reasons why, which we can go into a little bit later, will hold on to these training wheels. So imagine if you're trying to go over a big bump or you're trying to go for a long ride and you've got training wheels on, they actually just act as a roadblock. So the goal is that we want to take these training wheels off and put them in the garage, because one day if we need them, we can put them back on.
Yeah. So do those reflexes go away, or do they integrate? Is that a word for it?
So the language that we can use is integrate. So the way that it works is that, yes, we're all born with them. We're all born with these primitive reflexes. And based on the way that the brain develops, so by 12 months of age, they're supposed to integrate. So they never completely go away, but based on the way that the brain develops, it helps inhibit. So it just turns off the switch.
Yeah.
However, when kids become really, really sick, or if there's been a very, very stressful event, these primitive reflexes will return because their job and their main function is survival, right? So the main goal of this is that we don't want these primitive reflexes turned on for our daily living or our 24/7, because they actually put our brain and nervous system into an automatic fight or flight.
Right.
Increase that sympathetic nervous system. So as the brain develops and as we move and we learn and we grow, the big part of the brain helps turn the switch off. So, and then we can navigate our world without being in that fight or flight automatically.
It's kind of the rational brain needs to be in charge, not the
Correct.
one. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
That's probably the best explanation that anyone's ever given to me about that. So tell me, like in a real life example, what does it look like for a child who has the retained primitive reflexes?
Yeah, so something that you can, so quite early on, so say for kids that from 0 to 1, I think the biggest telltale signs is always milestones. So say, for example, like the brain develops in a very, very specific way. It has a specific blueprint. Now, knowing when those milestones are can be super, super crucial. So say, for example, I have a lot of families that have kids that haven't crawled before. And crawling is a foundational movement pattern that helps develop the brain, but also many other systems within the body too, such as your vestibular system. So for example, if I'm meeting a family for the first time and we talk about the first year of life, I will often have families say, oh, he crawled for maybe about a couple months, not long though. And for me, I'm like, okay, most likely he still has one of his primitive reflexes, which could be the ATNR reflex. So as from a 0 to 1 years of age, understanding the milestones can help be a good indicator. Okay, are these primitive reflexes still present, or is something else going on? Another example from 0 to 1 could be when we might be at the playground and there might be a really, really fast and loud car or motorbike that drives past, and we see our kids startle. They jump and they freeze for a moment. So by a certain age, the Moro reflex is supposed to integrate. And if we see this startle response as a behavior to something like a very unexpected loud noise, most likely that Moro reflex is still present. Now, quite often we see a lot of kids like transitioning from preschool into kindy, and we have parents that go, oh, we're finding that one example is we're finding that they're finding holding a pencil really, really tricky. Or they can't write their name properly yet, or they're reversing their letters backwards, their B's and their D's, or their Q's and their P's are backwards, as one example. So that's where I go, okay, that's a little sign from the nervous system that their hand control finds it really, really tricky, or their hand might be fatiguing. So then that's a clue for me, but also for parents to go, okay, let's check that palmar reflex. So that's a hand reflex that you can literally tickle or put input into the hand, and then the hand will respond. If the palmar reflex is still present, it can impact your fine motor movements of your hand, as well as it can impact your handwriting too. So those are just some examples. And once you can see it, you can't unsee it.
So my daughter, from 18 months to 3 years, if she got a fright, if she got shouted at, if she got a surprise, she would have a reflex anoxic seizure. So she'd hold her breath, she'd go blue, she'd pass out. It was the worst 18 months of my life.
Wow.
So could that have been retained primitive reflexes?
Yeah, so I definitely, so from that explanation, that's a very big sympathetic response, nervous system, fight or flight, big time. Her brain sounded like it went into freeze mode, and it went, oops, I don't feel safe right now. I'm just going to do something to help me. So yes, the Moro reflex most likely could have been present, but there's also another primitive reflex called the fear paralysis reflex. And that one is supposed to integrate in utero, so just before birth. And so it's a freeze response, essentially, fear paralysis, a deer in the headlights. So I would then test that reflex to go, okay, was that still present? Or I would even test it now to see if it's still present.
And what would stop that going away, like at birth, essentially?
Yeah, so we know that the baby and mother connection and nervous systems are divinely intertwined. The way that the baby feels reflects how the way that the mum feels and vice versa. So quite one example that where this fear paralysis reflex is often retained is if the mother has a stressful experience, and this can be an array of like low to high. It's not like extreme stress. The baby identifies or can feel the cortisol levels increase within the blood. And what happens is that the baby goes, okay, mum's feeling a little bit stressed right now. I'm just going to freeze. I'm not going to take any of her resources. I'm just going to keep her nervous system a little bit calm, and I'm just going to freeze. So because the baby's in utero and their brain actually hasn't developed the cortical thinking of like, okay, that's mum's feeling and that's my feeling, babies often will go, I can feel what mum's feeling right now. And they just freeze. Right. So the nervous system of the mums is super, super, super important throughout all of a child's life, but especially during pregnancy and within the first 7 years. Yeah, so that's like one element of what could happen is literally stress or sickness too.
Yeah. So she was diagnosed with congenital heart disease at the 20-week scan
Okay.
and had to have open heart surgery like within her first, well, she had an operation within 16 hours and then open heart surgery within 7 days. And yeah, so I was extremely stressed and I actually didn't want her to come out because she was really safe inside. That sounds so strange.
Yes.
Once when she was on my maternal circulation, she was perfectly safe. Nothing was bad. But the minute she was born, that's when everything could have gone badly wrong. So there was extreme, like subconscious, but also conscious fear about her actually being born. So that makes perfect sense. But she is 14 now. Is it still worth addressing that?
Absolutely, absolutely. One beautiful analogy that I always like to explain to parents, because I think sometimes parents go, oh no, is my child too old to work on this stuff? Absolutely not. Think of it, you've got a little sprout. You've got a garden, you've planted a seed, and the first seed is a little sprout, and that could represent babies from 0 to 5, right? It's still very, very small. It's still growing. If we put some effort in some water and some feed into it, it's going to keep growing. It's the same thing with working and identifying and supporting kids' nervous systems now with the work that we do. If we're from 5 to 10 years old, our tree or our sprout has developed a little bit more. We've got some branches and we've got some leaves, and we might be heavy on one side and a little bit weak on the other side, right? Representing the left and the right brain. If we have a look and put more feed and water, and we have exercise and we eat and we digest and we detox, we will be able to have an equal left and right branch, right? Representing the left and right brain. So there is no cap on age. However, as we know as adults, and by around mid-20s, the prefrontal cortex, which is the front of the brain, develops and it's quite strong. And beyond around that time is where we're like, okay, the branches are really, really strong. Nothing's going to really break it, right? But we can still work with elements around the nervous system, right? And working with strength or working with vision or working with hearing or smell that can strengthen the deficits within the brain and the nervous system. So honestly, there is no age cap at all. But little brains compared to big brains, little brains are a bit more adaptable and they adapt quickly.
I'm glad we just turned this into a little personal consultation for
No, I love it though, because because it's so relatable to so many people. And what I'm finding is that, like I see predominantly kids, right? And I will be having my initial consult with the mum or the dad or both, and the mum will go, "Oh, I can remember that felt like me when I was little." You know, like so many parents can relate to the things that we're talking about now, because primitive reflexes will often feed into adulthood as well if they're still retained.
So that's my daughter. And so what other types of children do you see in your clinic?
Yeah, so I always say to people, I'm happy to see anyone that has brain and nervous system.
Yeah.
That's everyone, because I don't think any of this should be exempt from someone that has a diagnosis or not, because just because you do doesn't mean that you might need a little bit support with something else. So if we put language to it, I see neurotypical and I see neurodivergent kids. Yeah, predominantly. So kids with ASD, ADHD, OCD, genetic conditions, epilepsy. We see lots of different types of kids. The point is that we are not fixing them.
Yeah.
We are not changing them. We are just making their brain and their nervous system stronger.
Yeah. Better able to cope with life.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah. You've talked about being stuck in fight or flight quite a lot, and we see that on a hair test. So whenever we see a hair test where we look at the sodium magnesium ratio and it's really, really high, we know that there's just stuck in fight or flight. And so that is often the kids with PDA, pathological demand avoidance. So do you see many kids with PDA?
I do. And I think, to be honest, I feel like it's more recent that we're seeing more kids receiving this type of diagnosis as well, where they most likely will have ASD in conjunction with PDA. And I have quite a few, especially at the moment, that I'm working with. And they also fascinate me so much because their response to the world is, I just need to protect myself. And unfortunately, you telling me or asking me to brush my hair puts me into fight or flight. And for me, it's about, on face value, to some people might go, oh, that child's just defiant. They don't want to do it. They can't be bothered. They're lazy. They're fatigued. They haven't ate well. When I look at it, I'm like, what is that child trying to tell me? What's that child trying to tell me? I try to look beyond the behavior. Okay, maybe 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago or an hour ago, you found it tricky to transition to the car. And then now that I've asked you to take off your shoes, that might have just been the last piece of the puzzle that might have made something to explode. So for especially kids with PDA, I try and look beyond the behavior. What is their brain and nervous system trying to tell me? And how can I lower that demand as much as possible that it looks like that we're just playing a game together?
Yeah. I think it's actually a really useful diagnosis, even though not like often given as a standalone diagnosis, because it does help you just understand that it's not a naughty child. It's not, just a defiant child, but it's a child who feels like they're being mugged if you tell them to go to the toilet.
Yeah.
And I think when we do the hair test and it shows this in black and white that your child is stuck in fight or flight, and we know then we just work in the nervous system and things will gradually improve. And about changing the language, like you say, like not saying go and brush your hair, but like making game of it or just leaving the hairbrush there and say I'm brushing my hair,
Exactly.
So once you have that understanding of that as a diagnosis, I think it makes everything better.
Hugely. I totally agree. I think it's something that we do really awesome in our clinic as well is having a look at whether a child has a PDA diagnosis or not. Like you will see defiance and you will see pushback from kids no matter what. But honestly, if you go in with curiosity instead of trying to correct them, they will just open up.
Yeah.
And they will just offer their heart to you because they can see that you're trying to seek connection rather than trying to correct them.
Yeah, absolutely. So a child comes into you, you can see their nervous system is a bit fried. What do you actually do with them in a session?
So a family comes in and an initial appointment, so me learning about their brain and their nervous system. Firstly, I just observe. Like we play games, we interact. We don't jump straight in because I want to see what's the communication like? How do they interact with me? Do they feel safe in their environment? Do they often look over to mum and dad for reassurance? Like I try and look at their behavior and understand, okay, how is that going to help how I interact with this child today? So firstly, I'll always observe. I'll observe their behavior and how they interact with me. Then primitive reflexes are always something that we will check for every single child if we can. Often for some kids with sensory difficulties, or often kids that we can visibly see that they're inflamed, so their gut is literally on fire, it's really tricky to touch their bodies or to touch and test these primitive reflexes, as their sensory receptors have turned up the volume really, really, really loud. So primitive reflexes, if we absolutely can. I also check their brain stem. So we look at something called cranial nerves, and cranial nerves are these nerves that help control eye movements, smell, your hearing, your vestibular system. And we're just checking to see, okay, are they working perfectly fine, or is there a little bit of a deficit that we need to explore? So rather than just looking at primitive reflexes, we look at the whole brain and nervous system, because it's like if you've got a sore shoulder and if you just look at the shoulder, but it's actually coming from your neck, you're missing a key part of the puzzle. So we look at collectively the brain, the nervous system. So it might look like balance. We look at the eyes, we look at the brain, we look at the brain stem. So on that first visit, we just learn more about kids' brains and bodies. From that, we gather a program together specific for that child, because there is no cookie cutter approach to each human. We use elements of a system to help identify where kids might need support, but then we make a specific program. Then from there, we do individual sessions, one-on-one, where we will work on these primitive reflexes. If a child needs more eye movement support, we will work on these eye movements. If a child needs sensory integration, we will work on sensory integration. And I often say to parents that might be, especially that might be early on in their journey with a diagnosis or getting therapy and support, I will say, it looks like we're just having fun. But trust me, they're brain-specific exercises and we're working on something, but it looks like we're just having fun. And if you don't have fun, the connection with, as a therapist, but also with families as well, and the child is missed, because it's all about connection. Just the brain stuff on top of it is just a bonus.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kids' mode of learning, is play, not, sitting down
and write this.
And then do you give homework as well?
Yeah, so on the initial visit, it's obviously depending case by case, of course, but the primitive reflexes are a key component of what we work on. So yes, we do give homework, but I always say to kids, it's not that type of homework that you're thinking of. Think of it like a game, or we're going to be doing a massage. So say, for example, with one of the primitive reflexes, the palmar reflex, so the one that we were speaking about before. So the palmar reflex impacts control and sensory of the hand. So fine motor movements, handwriting, zippers, shoelaces, buttons. And for some kids that have this palmar reflex present, it actually impacts the way that they move and control their hand. So one specific exercise that we would do is something called sensory brushing. So we have this specific sensory brush. It's called a TheraPressure brush. You can use a paintbrush, you can use a pen, you can use a hairbrush. And what happens is that you brush from the base of the hand over the fingers. And we are stimulating and stimulating and stimulating. So it kind of feels like you're having a massage, but it's tickling the receptors in the hand to tell the brain, hey, hand, I'm right here. Can you feel me? And then that helps the nervous system regulate. That's one typical form of homework that we might give. But then it could also be like a movement-based active exercise as well. Like, let's do 10 push-ups, or let's do 10 wall push-ups, because that open hand posture on the wall, having that sensory input with that pressure, sends a message to the brain, say, hey, brain, can you feel my hand? As one example.
My son has terrible handwriting, different child. So I'm thinking, oh, all right.
Brush your hand.
Start brushing his hand. And so you spoke about cranial nerves and their effect on, like, smell and taste and everything like that. So we see a lot of fussy eaters because we're trained eating therapists. And as we spoke about earlier, there is always a reason. No person, child or otherwise, wants to subsist on 3 foods the rest of their life. Like, there is always a reason why they have been backed into this corner. And it sounds like cranial nerves could be one of those reasons, which I had not even ever considered before. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think even one step before cranial nerves, I would go back to primitive reflexes because quite often so there's a primitive reflex called the rooting reflex, and so the rooting reflex is stimulated from the ear over to the cheek to the lips. So most women that breastfed were told just tickle their cheek and you'll see them move to the breast. So that's actually an involuntary response that babies have to help find the breast to feed or the bottle. And quite often, so one common example is where kids that are born via vaginal delivery have, as they exit the vaginal canal, they actually get compression on their head and their face. So this is one way that they can that it helps integrate the rooting reflex because you're actually putting pressure on the cranium, on the actual head and the face and the lips. So this can help this rooting reflex become a little bit more stable. Now, for some kids that are often delivered by C-section, they will often have feeding issues. They will often find latching to the breast or the bottle really, really tricky. Now, the rooting reflex is responsible for sensory, so the feeling and motor aspects, so the movement of the face, tongue, and mouth. So it's like saying, okay, the volume knob might be up really, really loud. So we might have kids want to like have sensitivity around their mouth. So maybe they avoid certain foods because of the texture or the feeling of it. Or on the other hand, we might have kids that are hyposensitive. So the volume knob is really, really down and they might crave something really, really crunchy or really, really hard within their mouth to get that sensory input. So for kids that have this primitive reflex, the rooting reflex still retained, it impacts the way that they control and move their mouth and their tongue. So I would look at the rooting reflex first in relation to kids that have limited diets or that are fussy eaters, because if you can't feel and move your mouth properly, it's going to be hard to eat.
And speak.
And speak, exactly right. Fussy eating and speech are a big, big indicator that we're looking at the rooting reflex.
We definitely look at, a child's oral motor skills and the kind of the strength and the reasons why they might not have the strength, but that is something else that we need to send kids off to get assessed.
Definitely, definitely. And it's honestly easy. And once you see it, you can't not see it. So what you can do is to test the rooting reflexes is grab a paintbrush, start from their ear, across their cheek and over their mouth. And what you want to see, if the rooting reflex is still present, is that you'll kind of see their lips rolling together, like they're doing a little kiss. And you'll see some sort of mouth movement. And once you repeatedly do it, they can't control it. It just happens. And this is an indicator that they still have the primitive reflex active.
But if you keep brushing it on a daily basis, then they integrate it.
Correct.
Yeah. Because I know you've given that homework to
yes,
because
exactly right.
They're sitting at home.
Same
brushing.
principle applies.
Yeah. And then another reason why kids become fussy eaters is because like they can't sit up straight. So you try eating when you're hunched over or slumped over, like there's nowhere for the food to go. So then how can you help with that kind of getting?
Yeah, you're actually so right. That's a big element to it as well. I'll often have parents say, we'll be eating dinner and Jimmy's sitting on his legs and then he wants to spin around in the chair and he might have a few bites and then he's running off again and then he's coming back. We'll have a few bites and then he might have a sip of water and there's food everywhere and then he's running off again and he's coming back. So how I view that situation in particular is, okay, one, Jimmy's trying to tell me that he wants to move his body. And then I go, okay, why is Jimmy finding it tricky to sit still? Always coming back to baseline, to at the bottom of what we call like the developmental pyramid is primitive reflexes. So then I'll go, okay, does Jimmy have a primitive reflex called the spinal galant? The spinal galant reflex is one of the primitive reflexes that help kids and babies exit out the vaginal canal. So they're really important with what we call like spinal stability or core stability. So you can test this primitive reflex by grabbing a pencil or a paintbrush and brushing down either side of their spine. And you're looking for a jerk response. So they're going to have a little fold in the side of their body, right? So what this primitive reflex tells the brain is that every time my back is touched or stimulated, it feels like someone's tickling me. And if someone tickles you, you can't sit still. It looks like you have ants in your pants and you're constantly ringing around and you've got to move. Sometimes tight waistbands, so like of shorts or of pants, can also elicit this primitive reflex too. Or if we've got tags on the clothing, on the back of the shirt, that can also tickle and stimulate that primitive reflex. There's also two other coordination reflexes called the ATNR and the STNR, which actually impacts your head and your head control in relation to your body. So say, for example, if Jimmy's sitting down at the dinner table and he's looking down at his plate and he has the primitive reflex called STNR, every time he puts his head down, so his chin towards his chest, his whole body is going to want to move forward. And he goes, oh no, I can't put my head in my food. So I'm just going to get up and run away and move around because this feels funny. Or same thing, if I'm looking at my sister sitting next to me, if I have the ATNR reflex and I turn my head to the left, my whole body is going to follow. So it actually makes it really hard to sit still and to concentrate on what you're doing because your body is pulling you in directions that you can't control because of these primitive reflexes.
Mm. It's interesting about like the tags and, the tight pants and everything, because something like sensory processing D, whatever you want the D to stand for, it's a description of the problem. It's a description of what it looks like, but it's not a description of why, or it doesn't give any kind of clarity to why it's happening. So it could be a zinc deficiency, could be primitive reflexes, could be anything else. It's just like, this is what it looks like, and this is just what we're going to label with it, and then we just move on with our lives, which is so unhelpful.
I know, it is so unhelpful. And I think it is so unhelpful because I have quite a few kids lately that are transitioning into high school and they're learning and cognitively understanding more about their brain and their body and learning their differences and their strengths between other people. And I think sometimes to be honest, no, I do definitely think that if we just elaborate and we collaborate with all different types of people and be shown like, it's okay, one person has a brain like this and another person has a brain like this, but you know what? You both have a brain and a nervous system. We just feel and we think differently, because I have a lot of kids that can feel and know that they're different, and it really, really impacts their self-worth and their confidence, and being labeled as, oh, you just have a sensory D or a sensory difference, and this child's like, oh, why am I different? And there's nothing ever wrong with that. It's just their body feels and views the world differently.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we can collaborate, like everyone comes together to embrace these differences, the world would be different and would actually be able to offer tools and resources and support to these kids in their everyday capacity, whether it's at school, home, friendships, houses, anything, I find it really tricky, and it's something that I'm really, really passionate about, because I'm like, the one thing that I really care about is how each child deserves equal and every opportunity as everyone else.
Yeah. And they deserve to be happy.
That's right. They deserve to be happy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what we're saying is, if your child has a brain and nervous system, you should go and see Erin. And so tell me, what is the process if somebody does want to come to see you? Tell me about the process, where you're based, how you go about making appointments. Tell me all the logistical pieces.
Sure. So if your child has a brain and nervous system, and if any of this has resonated with you at all, or even if you just want to come check it out, message me on Instagram. My handle is Dr. Erin Taylor Han. Type that in, send me a DM, because then I will get you in contact with our team and have a look at availability. I also wanted to share that I am creating a community called Beyond the Behaviour, and it's a community where I want parents and families to join to learn more about their child's brain and nervous system and to look beyond the behaviour. It has a community of like-minded mums that just get it and they understand the tricky mornings or the tricky transitions, that there's actual nervous system tools, exercises, more about these primitive reflexes that you can do at home. You watch the video, I teach you how to do it, and you can do it at home. But as well as we're going to have a Facebook community where we're going to have monthly Q&As and monthly conversations with other allied health therapists, so we can get a whole holistic perspective on how we can support our kids.
Yeah.
So they're two ways that you can reach out.
Yeah. But you're based in Gladesville.
Based in Gladesville in Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do see, like, people can make an appointment, come.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can also contact the clinic directly, Brain and Body Health in Gladesville. You can type on Google, and initially we book in phone chats. So we'll have a discussion about your child and how we can support and just get more information. And then from there, you can book an initial assessment so we can look at your kid's brain and nervous systems.
Awesome. Very, very good. Now, is there anything that you really wanted to share today that we haven't covered?
I think I've hit bits and pieces of it, but I think the biggest thing and the absolute message that I want to spread to the world is, oh, it's going to make me cry, is look beyond the behavior. I was a little girl who was misunderstood because I was actually filled with a lot of anger when I was little, and I had very poor emotional regulation skills, and I found learning really, really tricky. And I really wish that my mum had these tools. I really do. Because one, it's enabled me to be in a world where I absolutely love what I do, but also imagine the safety and connection that so many kids could experience if we could just really understand what their brain and body is trying to tell us.
Yeah.
I honestly think it will change the absolute world if we just look through this lens and help understand our kids' brain and nervous system.
Yeah. There is no such thing as a bad child.
That's right. There's no such thing as a bad child. They're just trying to tell you something. They don't know how yet.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I feel like there'll be another podcast in the future focusing on some of these things. But yeah, thank you for joining me.
No, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. I think the work that you're doing, I just want to add a side note on it as well. I think the work that you're doing is paramount, because without naturopaths, nutritionists, functional med doctors, we also wouldn't be doing the awesome work that we're doing without you guys. Because as you know, there's a lot of kids that need additional support that's not just nervous system and brain based. And I will always, always, always reach out to those awesome other professions, because without them, we wouldn't be able to make change.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks for tuning in to Holistic Health for Happy Kids. I hope you found today's episode helpful and inspiring on your journey to raise thriving, healthy little ones. Remember, small, consistent changes can lead to big transformations. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at The Pediatric Naturopath for more tips, tools, and inspiration. If you've got a question or a topic you'd love to hear about, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care and keep supporting your kids in the most natural, nurturing ways possible.